Hi there, I'm John from CNCKing.com, and today we make some rounded banks. Through the last couple of months, you've noticed I made a lot of custom banks, and they've all been sort of square like this here. This is my old bank. And now what I want to do is have another library of letters that are rounded. So this shows you the difference. They're the same height, 8 inches tall. But you can see how this one's a lot rounder and this one's more square. Now your first question might be, why are you coming in with a whole bunch of different designs and different libraries and all this kind of stuff? Don't you have a lot of inventory? And that's what I love about this business. I don't. Everything we make, when we get the order from the customer, that's when we make the bank. We don't make it beforehand. And that means we can customize it however they want. So in this case here, they want a J, or they want, a Loon, or they want, whatever it is. We make them all in batches. And once that batch is done and finished how they want it or how they ordered it on CNCKing.com, then we ship it out to them. So the only inventory, so to speak, are the 1 or 2 prototypes I make to confirm the design works. After that, that's sort of stored away and come out with some other designs or other shapes. Now the nice thing about that is that I'm able to basically make limitless or endless or infinite banks available on the website. Because I don't know when someone's going to order an elephant bank. They might order 10 of them in one shot, or they might order one 6 months from now. Who knows? It's completely random. And because of that, you don't want to have inventory of 20 elephants and have it sit on the shelf for a year or two, and then all of a sudden you need 30 of them. So by not having any inventory, it allows me to offer a tremendous amount of different designs on CNCKing.com without having to hold all that stuff. Now the next question you might have is, well, that's nice, but I need a bank in a week. Well, we already have the laminated boards ready. It generally takes a day for us, once we get the order, to process it and cut it out, and maybe add another day or 2 for the finishing if they choose that option, and then it gets shipped out. So yeah, it means it doesn't mean you get overnight. If we don't finish it, it would be, I guess, overnight if you're really, really in a rush for it. But generally, when someone's birthday is coming up, because they don't change year to year. And when you have a kid, well, they're in no rush. They get it on Monday or they get it on Wednesday. Doesn't really matter. So that's something to keep in mind with this business model. It's a little bit shared with what I do with my sort of day jobs, if you want to put it that way, with CNCKing.com, where we do completely custom work all the time. That again is sort of an on-demand thing. You can't build inventory for something you don't know what the order will come in as. So that's what I'm bringing to the banking business, is no inventory, infinite design possibilities, and quick turnaround. So here we are making another batch of banks. As always, I make all the laminated boards here in the shop, cut them in smaller pieces, glue them together, and then with the router that I'm doing here, definitely not real-time speed. I go ahead, flatten both sides again, and then I go ahead and make the banks. Now this is really clear. It's actually one of the best videos I've taken so far of the chips. That's because the front is missing on the machine and are on the dust boot. And that's on purpose because I want to get a feel of what's actually happening during the cutting and production process for these banks. You can tell a lot about a machine just by listening to it, and even more by seeing how the chips are being produced, which you can see all over the table, but also the direction of them and all that kind of stuff. There's quite a lot of information that you can sort of glean just by looking at what's happening, and from there, further optimizing the design to produce better results. What you see is going back and forth to a bunch of different bits. It's just changing bits. So right now, it's going up and down a lot. So that's definitely drilling holes that will then match what the laser produces for this round of banks. Now, there are a lot of chips all over the place. I probably end up using up about half of the board ends up becoming chips, if not more. And that's not a problem. The machine loves doing this kind of work, and I love giving it to do this kind of work. So after it's all cut out, the next thing is to use the jigsaw. And the jigsaw is the part that I want to improve upon next, because the way I'm doing it now, it's not very safe. It's not very effective. It's relatively slow. Bandsaw would work great. I had another bandsaw, but I sold it because it was just too small. I couldn't even do these things with it. You know, at a 14-inch bandsaw, what I really need is like a 24-inch or a 30-inch bandsaw to do this properly. Because then this stuff would be so easy to do with a very fine blade. So after all of these things are cut, the next step is to go to the router. And what the router does is get rid of that little ledge all the way around. That little ledge, as you can see clearly here now, needs to be just removed. If I were to cut all the way through the wood, I think some of these pieces would go flying off the table and go right for my head. So that's why you want to keep everything sort of together on the CNC machine, and then once it's off, then you can go ahead and customize it further manually. Now, generally what I do at sandboxranch.com is I do a show and tell, and I show it after it's all finished. In this case here, just do something a little bit different. This is right off the machine, literally. I haven't done any sanding to them yet, and this is basically what was done in this batch that worked out. Again, I do large batches, and sometimes some designs just don't work for various reasons. So here you see the rounded J. The reason for this tab, because if you don't, the reason for it is because if you don't have this tab here, what happens is you put money in this and it starts to wobble because it's rounded. I didn't have that problem with the square banks because you have a square bottom. With the rounded, you can have a rounded bottom. Here is a Loon. Now this is something also I'm developing. So you can actually put your coins in two different spots on this one. So here and here. So if you have bills and stuff, you can put them directly here. If you have smaller coins that go through the neck, they go through there. Here is a rounded E. This one here is actually going to be pretty interesting. It's an idea I had when I visited a show, and I saw, I have periodic coasters on sandboxranch.com, and I thought, some people might want that stuff as a bank. So that's why this is square. So in this case here, the customer will actually have mercury, the periodic table mercury, and all the details about that element on the front here. But it's also more expandable than that, because let's say you have a family photo or whatever else you could think of, and you want that to be your bank. Well, this sort of stuff doesn't really work in that format. Well, this works perfectly. So you can have your bank, and you can have your photograph here, or logo or whatever for corporate use, or if you want a tip jar or any of that kind of stuff, this is your option. So this is obviously just a square, but I'll be doing a round one, I'll be doing an oval one, just rough shapes that you typically see. Here is a rounded D. And again, the little tab here is very important, because if you don't have that, the banks tend to wobble. Here's the A. Now this one here doesn't have a tab because you have two solid things, so it can stand straight like this. And this is the B. Now obviously there's a lot more letters in the alphabet than those ones. So what I do is, as I get orders in, I do a couple more of the rounded ones, and eventually I have a whole library of those. Same thing with the shapes. There's endless shape possibilities that we can offer you, and animals, and it just never really ends. And that's what I really enjoy about this business. So if you want something that you don't see here or on the website, just contact us. Say, I want a bank of a unicorn. I want a bank of a horseshoe. I want a bank of a computer. Whatever. We can make it for you. Now here I am laser engraving, or actually here I'm actually cutting. The next step after this is the laser engraving. So I'm cutting out all the front windows. Now whether it's polycarbonate, acrylic, or any other material we can cut here in the shop, let's say you really want a glass, we can cut that as well. So if, whatever you want, I always do testing with it first. And that's what I use the MDF that you see here. This is a rough piece of scrap MDF. Again, it doesn't matter if it's 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch. It's just double check the hole spacing and the alignment, everything's correct. Because you gotta remember, I'm using two different CNC machines to produce two different elements of the bank. I could technically use the router to produce the acrylic, but then I won't get a nice flame polish edge to it. And the engraving will still have to be done with the laser, though technically I could still do it with the router. It's just, I like having a lot of diversity of machines in the shop, so therefore I could use the best machine for the given job, not sort of be stuck with doing everything with the one machine, because that's all that I have. Now, if this was polycarbonate, for instance, you wouldn't be able to really tell the difference so far. This is clear acrylic. Polycarbonate is actually bulletproof glass, and the only real difference is when you actually engrave it or fiber color change it. When you fiber color change acrylic or polycarbonate, it becomes jet black, which is really, really nice. The nice thing about it is that the black is permanent. It's not like the spray painting black that we do to brand these you know, the acrylic front windows that we do for the banks. Just to give you an idea of the diversity of the bits that we use here in the shop to make this and other products for customers. So this is a 1/16 inch bit, and this is our 1/2 inch diameter bit. So there's quite a difference. And we use a lot of different bits in between to do various projects here in the shop for Sandbox Ranch and other people, of course. And that's how we make these banks here that you see. Now the bits are this is very challenging for bits. For something like this, it might not seem that way because it's relatively round. A little bit easier on the bits that we use. But you have to remember we also do square bits, and we also do shapes and a bunch of other stuff. They're a little bit more challenging because, again, this is one of my first banks I ever made, so it looks kind of rough. There's a lot of sharp corners, especially with these ones here. And because of that, the bit never goes to full power. And what I mean by that is the bit is always going at the same speed with the machine. That's not the issue. The machine can't go 100% fast, 100% fast, 100% fast. It ramps up and it ramps down, ramps up, ramps down. And when you do that, especially in red oak and other hardwoods, you tend to cause a lot of issues with heating. Because unlike, let's say, cutting a piece of wood straight across, all that heat goes away in the chips. And that's why you want to spin the bit so fast and go really, really fast through material. But when you're making, let's say, banks like this here, even with, you know, lots of small little things like this here, by the time the machine ramps up, it already has to ramp down. Now, with a machine that's rigid like this, that's not an issue whatsoever. If there is any issues causing too much stress on the bit actually just breaks. And this guy doesn't even care, doesn't even realize, it just keeps going as if there was no bit or there was a bit, makes no difference to it. With my other machine, I had issues because the ramping up and down would cause bit deflection. So this here is a very rigid machine. So to give you an idea, so when the bit speeds up, if the top is not very rigid, it could actually end up being like this, moving around, or angles like this. And that causes a lot of problems that I had when I first started making these banks, 7, 8 months ago. And now that I got all that stuff sorted, now I can do a lot of fun stuff with the banks that I really wanted to get into once I got things realized. So if you're looking for custom banks, we have a website, sandboxranch.com, with a whole bunch of banks. But if you want something different, you know, a bank of a frog, a bank of a whale, I don't care. Whatever you want, we can make it for you, and we ship it right to your door.